My name is Dan Dotson, and I live in upstate New York in a little town called North Java. It's about an hour from Buffalo, and my experiences have all happened right behind my house in the area that you can see the video in. And they actually started just a little over a year ago. It was April of last year. It was the last Saturday of the month. I'll remember it for as long as I live. It was about 9:30 at night, and I had stepped out onto my back deck where I am now to have a cigarette. And right when I stepped out, I noticed that the coyotes around my house were going absolutely crazy. Like it sounded like my house was surrounded by them. And I was sitting there listening to them, and I want to say maybe 10, 20 seconds after I stepped out, I heard three wood knocks coming from the area right behind me. And it sounded like somebody had taken a wooden baseball bat and was smacking it against a tree. And then the area, I stood there listening for a few seconds, and about 10 seconds after that, the area directly to the left of my house, I heard three whooping calls that sounded something like what you would hear a chimpanzee or a gorilla, what they would make. And as soon as I heard those calls, the coyotes went completely silent. And needless to say, that definitely caught my attention. So I stood outside for about 20 minutes later, listening to see if I could hear anything else, and I didn't hear anything. So I went back inside, and, went to bed. And all that week, I was thinking, playing back in my head what I had experienced. And a week later, around the same time, I came out to have a cigarette, and I decided to try replicating the whooping calls that I had heard just to see if I could get some sort of vocal response. And I didn't hear anything. I sat outside for about half hour, didn't hear anything. So I went back inside, and the very next day, my wife and I were sitting out here, and I just happened to look over to the left side of my house, and just to the left of my house, there are some fallen trees. And the day before that, I had spent the whole entire day out here on the back porch with my camera because I do nature photography as a hobby. And so I'm always constantly looking around, watching to see if there's any wildlife that shows up. And around the base of the fallen trees, there had been a pile of sticks that had been there for, I don't even know how long they'd been there for. And I just happened to look, and I noticed they weren't there anymore. So I thought that was kind of odd. And I started looking around, and I noticed just a little ways past where they had been, it's still there. There's a teepee like stick structure that hadn't been there the day before. And so, needless to say, that definitely caught my interest. So I grabbed my phone and I took a picture of it from where I was sitting. And then I went on, took a walk over to where it was, and I got some close up pictures. Now, at that time, my landlord didn't own all of the property behind. around me because there were people that had owned cabins behind my house, and my landlord was actually in the process of buying them so that he could have more land to hunt on. And so I didn't really know exactly where the property lines were, so I didn't really explore much back then because I didn't really want to trespass on anybody's property. But back in January, I had talked to him and he told me that he had actually finished buying up all of the property around me. So, and he told me because he knows I do nature photography that I could explore any part of the property that I wanted to. So I decided, just to take a walk in the woods, just to see what I could see. And I was walking past the area where that stick structure is. It's about maybe 50 feet from my back porch. And I noticed these odd human-like footprints in the snow. And I'm guessing they were from a juvenile because they were almost the same size as my foot. I didn't have a tape measure at the time, so I just took a picture of my foot next to one just for size reference. And since then, I've explored quite a bit of the property, but not all of it yet. But I have found multiple different types of stick structures. And about a month and a half ago, I was walking through a clearing back behind my landlord's deer camp because I was hearing the red-winged blackbirds and I wanted to see if I could get a decent picture of them. And I found these two impressions in the grass that was dried up and had blown over, and they looked very much like something had stepped there. And I had a tape measure with me at the time, and I measured one and measured 14 inches long by 7 inches wide, and the other one was 22 inches long by about, I want to say, 14 inches wide. And I have also, I've sent you the recordings that I got, the one with the mock owl recordings that were like right around my house. And those recordings that I got from the noises that were coming from across the road from me. And I'm hoping that, within the next couple days, I can get out and do more exploring and see what else I can find.
Yeah, those structures that you sent were kind of interesting. I looked at those and also listened to the recordings. So you say this is a mock owl. Why is it a mock owl and not an owl? How do you determine that?
Right after I made the recordings, because I wanted to be 100% sure that whether or not it was an owl. And the closest sound I could find that matched what I was hearing was the mating call of the barred owl. But after doing further research, I learned that their mating season ended in March, and the recordings I got were in middle of April. and I was hearing about 4 to 6 different individuals around my house. And from the research I did, told me that even during mating season, barred owls don't gather in groups like that. And I've also, come into contact with different Sasquatch researchers and played those recordings for them, and they have told me that that is 100% what I was hearing was a mock owl call, because barred owls don't have that little purr at the end of it like what my recordings were getting.
Well, that's interesting. I haven't heard that before either, but thank you for explaining that. That will help my audience to understand that when you play something that sounds that much like an owl, because I thought it sounded like an owl too. It's good to have an explanation as to how you know it's not an owl, you know.
Right. And right after I got that recording, I heard one coming from the trees right behind me, and it was actually so loud I could almost feel the sound in my chest. And I used to hunt a lot when I was younger, and I've heard owls out in the woods close by me when I was hunting, and they have never sounded that loud that I could feel it in my chest like that before.
So it was that same owl sound is what you were hearing coming up behind you.
Yes,
And did it seem to be moving?
it didn't really sound like it was moving, but it sounded almost like it was a group of them surrounding the clearing behind my landlord's deer camp, which honestly makes me think that they may have been hunting deer, because we've got a lot of deer back here. And the prop this property that my landlord owns is actually a registered deer management area.
Okay, so that makes sense that they would have a supply of food, huh?
Right, and there is actually also a creek and a pond that aren't very far behind my house either, so they've also got a steady water source as well.
When these were coming up behind you, did you see any movement in the trees or hear any kind of rustling or movement in the woods?
Not that I could hear.
So have you always been interested in Bigfoot, or is this something new just since this happened?
No, I've been interested in Bigfoot probably since I was about 5 years old and first saw Harry and the Hendersons, but I didn't really become super interested until about 10 years ago, when I first started realizing that, Bigfoot doesn't just exist in the Pacific Northwest. Because, growing up, those were the only stories that I had heard, was the ones that came from out in that area. So I didn't realize that, they've been spotted in basically every state except Hawaii. And yeah, I think it's just Hawaii that hasn't had any reported sightings.
In that deer management wooded area that's part of the land behind you, do you know how many acres are in that?
It's I believe my landlord told me it's a total of 50 acres.
And beyond that, is there like forest wooded areas like all in that area or?
Um, yes, there's like forest and farm fields, and there are other houses, because the road that my landlord lives on kind of winds back through that.
Just trying to get a feel of the land, kind of how it lays and such. Um,
Right.
So has anyone else in the area that you know of reported having sightings or these structures or any other form of evidence around you?
That's actually interesting because a couple weeks ago, I was talking with a field researcher for the BFRO who lives in Buffalo. And as he was talking with me and I was telling him about my experiences, he was looking up other reports that had been reported in the area within the last few years. And there actually was somebody in my area that reported strange whooping sounds back behind his house. And I think this was back in like 2018, he said. And then there was somebody in Warsaw, which is a town about maybe 20 minutes from me, who reported um somebody who was out in his backyard one night and it sounded like there was somebody in the woods talking Russian to him when nobody else was back there. And I actually have a friend of mine that I used to work with who years ago was hunting in a town called Bliss, which is about 10 miles from me. And one morning he went out early for bow hunting season and he was climbing into his tree stand and he had like night vision goggles on so he could see where he was going. And as he was climbing up into his tree stand, he heard a rustling and he looked up and in one of the limbs right above his tree stand, he says he saw a very humanoid looking figure looking down at him. And as he was climbing up, it actually growled at him and it scared him so much that he left immediately and never went back.
He described it was just a humanoid looking creature.
Yes,
And when was that?
that was, I think when he told me the story, it had been like 5 years prior. So I'm gonna say it was about 2016, 2017, but don't quote me on that because I don't real actually know for sure.
So his tree stand was up in the tree, but this was even up beyond that. How large of a creature did it seem to be, do you think?
He said it looked to be about the size of an average human. So he believes he saw a juvenile Sasquatch, but he tried convincing himself that it was a bear because he didn't want he knew if he told any of his family members what he actually thought it was that they would make fun of him and tell him he was crazy.
That does happen. So have you had anyone, have you told people that thought that you were just, not hearing things accurately or something?
Back when I found that footprint in the snow by that stick structure by my house, I decided to message my landlord and ask him if he had seen that anything that seemed strange on his trail cameras because he had trail cameras set up back in the woods along the pathway that goes back there. And he asked me why, and I sent him. I told him I found these odd footprints in the snow, and I sent him pictures of them. And he messaged me back and told me that they were old coyote tracks, which that doesn't add up because coyotes don't have human looking feet. So I, kind of didn't want to press the issue because at that point it struck me that he didn't really believe in that kind of stuff.
Seen any orbs or anything like that out that way?
And actually, yes. It was actually last summer. Me and my wife were. It was about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. It was twilight, and me and my wife were in the living room watching TV. We were gonna watch TV, and we were sitting on the couch, and off to the left side of our TV, we have a couple of windows that overlook our side yard, and something just caught my eye, and so I looked, and I noticed this blue flashing light, and as I was watching it, it started off because we can see my landlord's deer camp from our living room, and it started off like over in that area, and then noticed I noticed it three different times, and each time I noticed it, it got seemed to get closer to the house. And I told my wife about it, and she didn't see it, but she believed that I had seen something, and it kind of freaked her out. So she had me go out into the yard and look around to see if I could see anything, and there was no source of like electricity or anything like that these lights could have come from, and they were way too bright and not the right color to be a firefly or anything like that. And I have read and heard stories of these lights being associated with Sasquatch, and I don't really know what to make of what I saw, but I definitely have experienced that.
So they flashed on and off, or did they stay steady?
No, they flashed on and off. The first time I saw it, it was close to my landlord's deer camp, and the next two times I saw it, it was in the middle of my side yard.
And that's the only time you've seen lights or orbs or any kind of glowing lights or flashing lights?
Yes.
Have you seen any craft or anything like that out there, any UFOs?
Actually, yes, I want to say it was back in March, or it was either February or March. My wife was on her way to work one morning, and she was about maybe 2 miles from our house. And she called me after this happened, and she said she had looked up into the sky, because it was daylight out. It was almost this, like it is now. And she said she saw what looked to be an extremely bright star. And, she had to glance away, just to keep her eyes on the road. And she, when she looked back, it was gone. And it was a split second when she looked away from it and then looked back. And there was, planes don't move that fast. And she said it definitely weirded her out, but we definitely believe that she saw a UFO that day.
Well, what is your philosophy about Bigfoot? What do you think they are?
Oh, that I'm want to say they are flesh and blood, but with some of the evidence that I've seen, especially like on your videos that I've watched with that guy, I can't remember what his name was, but he was the one who had that trail camera. He would walk around with the trail camera strapped to his back, and he caught that portal opening up with what looked like a Bigfoot stepping through it. I'm definitely starting to lean towards they're very, I don't want to say supernatural, but they definitely have abilities that we don't quite understand yet. And perhaps we never will understand how they have these abilities or why. But I also listen to like the old Native American legends about them, stating that, they were the original inhabitants of Earth, and that when man was created, we didn't, man had no idea how to survive on his own. So they took us under their wing and taught us, how to live off the land, and, taught us all of their customs and traditions. And, I very much believe in that. So I'm, starting to lean towards that they do have supernatural abilities. We just don't understand them yet.
Yeah, they have some, there's some very, very different views and opinions of that and all over the place. And I'm like you, I mean, I'm not, I'm pretty open-minded about it. I just kind of listen to people's experiences. And right now that's sort of all we have to go on is how people have interacted with them and experienced them.
Right. And yes, I believe that there are some that can be aggressive, but I also believe that they can, when we're out walking in the woods and, there's one or possibly a group of them nearby, that they can sense what our intentions are. And I think that is what possibly triggers some of these, negative or scary encounters. Because, if you look at the Native American legends, they also state that the Native Americans believe them to be protectors of the forest, and they don't really like anybody they think is going to be out there, you know, doing harm. So fully believe that if you go out there with good intentions, you're going to probably have a probably neutral or a good good encounter with them. But if somebody goes out there, wanting to, cut trees down or something, they're not going to take a very good liking to that.
It sounds like you might have some Bigfoot activity back there behind you in the woods. So be careful when you're out there roaming around.
Oh, I definitely am. And I always, whenever I go out there, I always, and talk out loud and announce myself that, if, just in case they are around, because, every once in a while when I'm out there, I can kind of feel like I'm being watched. But I always let them know that I'm not there to cause any harm or disturb anything that they're possibly doing. So I think that definitely helps.